Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This is Daniel from Nothing Notable. Today is Thursday, October 29th, 2020, and in this pod I'm joined by Jack Hubert and Tyler Pruyn, and we're talking about our favorite college classes. Before we jump into the goofs, I just had a couple of quick things I wanted to mention about this pod. First, you can listen to this podcast on our YouTube channel, Nothing Notable, or you can also find it on Spotify. Just search up the Nothing Notable podcast on Spotify and you can listen to us on the go. Second, more of a technical thing. In the last portion of the pod, when Jack is talking about his favorite class experience, it started to get a little bit windy, and a couple of dog walkers came by, so you can hear a little bit of background noise, but hopefully it's not too distracting for you. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into the pod.
I feel like everyone can do an Al Pacino impression.
Do it.
Hoo-ah!
Okay, yeah.
But we've all had, about 4 years of experience in college, and in this next chapter of our lives, we'd like to start it off with just kind of reminiscing and talking about our favorite points in college. So this might be a little series that hopefully Kenny can jump on eventually. Rip Kenny for the time being, though.
Big rip, big rip.
Big rip for Kenny.
A good fart joke.
Yeah. Wow, great stuff. I think that wraps this one up.
I think that wraps this one up. Thank you, guys. But yeah, this one is just going to be about our favorite classes and also just our favorite clubs in college and how they kind of made or broke, perhaps, our college experience and how we can... that
one got me for some reason.
We can use that in our lives just in general in the future. So I guess I'll get started.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Where did you go?
Yeah,
let's do that first. Let's just inform everyone of
where we went.
Go on a
we
quick
went.
rundown.
So yeah, I went to a couple places, kind of. I went to AMDA in Hollywood. It's like a theater school. I went there for a full 30 days, I think. I didn't go there for too long. But after that, I took a year off, and then I graduated from UC Davis in 3 years. So yeah.
Which is impressive, because you took a whole year off, and then it was basically like taking 4 years in 3 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. It was really interesting, because I kept saying I was going to graduate UC Davis in 3 years, since I got there, but I really never knew if I could actually do it or not.
You just needed to believe in yourself.
Exactly. I was like, worst case scenario, I'll just be like, I just decided to take another year. Best case scenario, I've just been saying the thing I was going to do. And I think around this time last year, I actually figured out, I can fully graduate.
Did you take courses in the summer in order to achieve such an accomplishment?
I took one summer session. So that was a couple classes over last summer. But besides that, I just took heavy loads every... just great, big, large loads. Every quarter. I was on the quarter system. So
I'm curious for people who are listening if they could hear the moment when you realized what you said, because I could see it when you saw it when it happened.
You could definitely. I feel like you could definitely hear my thoughts coming out when I talk. But I was gonna say something, but then I forgot.
Well, I have something to say.
Oh, okay. I had something to say too, but if you have something to say, fine.
Remember.
Go ahead.
Do you want a Rochambeau?
Yeah.
But
best
guys,
of one?
Best
remembered.
of one. Sham, go ahead.
That was that was a good
That was
good
good
bit.
because you actually had scissors and you kind of had paper.
Yeah. For the folks at home who can't see, my hand was out flat, gesturing towards him.
That's a beautiful bit. I like that. I was gonna say I commend you for taking a summer session, because you kept saying I'll probably in order to graduate on time, for whatever on time means, in order to graduate on time, I'm going to probably take some summer classes. And I was always like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay. Because everyone says that.
Right.
Everyone's like, yeah, I'm going to take some summer courses this year. I'm just going to grind. I'm just going to grind. And most people never do.
Summer classes, I'm going to graduate in 2 years.
Exactly. Most people never do. And they end up at college, an extra semester or an extra year or something like that. But you actually did it. So good job.
Yeah. And luckily for me that year, I was actually filming something over the summer. So it was just living in Davis and, doing a bunch of things. I kept busy. I feel like sometimes if people don't want to take summers, it's because their friends aren't around or they have nothing else to do besides school. Mm-hmm. So that can be kind of difficult. But what I was going to say is a heavy load for a UC/quarter system would be about 16 or more per quarter. So at my peak quarter, I think I was taking 21 units. And a normal load would be around 12 to 15.
I think you're going to need to start saying a normal course load.
Yeah, a normal load. I'm just kidding, course load. But yeah, that's just like my background. And which one of you Bellas wanna get started?
I had one more quick question I was going to ask you,
Okay.
but if you don't want to talk about yourself anymore, that's fine. We can move on.
I mean, you can ask me.
I can
the
ask you
question.
questions?
I'm blushing.
Is that okay?
Of course.
Do you like when I ask you questions?
I love it.
All right. Well, my question for you was, did you get credits from like AP courses in high school that helped you achieve such an accomplishment?
Yes, I took, I think, only AP English and then AP Literature were the only ones that I passed them and I could get credit. So I passed the A-Push test, but I couldn't get credit for them for some reason, just because it was like a 4 and above or something like that.
And you're not a smart boy.
Exactly. So I think I got 8 units from that. Yeah, just for some background, UC Davis, you can graduate with 180 units or more. So I graduated with exactly 180 units because I thought it'd be funny. And I also got 5 units for my short film, 1 quarter. So
That's really cool.
Yeah.
yeah. So Dan, you were the only successful person to to initially graduate from the college they initially chose.
Right. I feel like when I have an expectation for something, it's usually met. It's like usually achieved in some way. And so I went to San Francisco State, which is like a commuter school for the most part. There's a ton of off-campus housing, so a lot of people live nearby the campus as well. But like for the most part, it's a commuter school. So there's not like a thriving community there, which I knew going into it, and I was perfectly fine with because all I cared about was getting in and graduating on time and with success. Like I wanted to do well because it wasn't until like late into my high school time, my high school years, that I realized like I was smarter than I thought I was. And by smarter than I thought I was, I don't mean like a genius. I just mean I wasn't dumb, because I always thought I was dumb because I was just bad at like math and stuff. And I just didn't apply myself whatsoever. So like towards the end of high school, I started to actually get better grades. And I realized like, oh, I could maybe do well in college, like especially with subject matter that I'm interested in. So I decided to go to SF State, and I decided to major in film because I've always known that I wanted to be a filmmaker. And so going there, it was really about study, and it was about like the education and not so much the experience of college, which I don't regret not doing sort of the quote unquote college experience of like finding your community and like finding your lifelong friends. And because for me, that wasn't what I wanted or was asking for.
Would you say there's like a sense of camaraderie with like commuters at all? Like as soon as they start talking, like, do you like make friends like pretty fast just because like there's not time in the dorms to like really meet people because you're just commuting?
Totally. Yeah. Whenever like you'll ask someone like, hey, did you do the homework or something? And they're like, yeah, I did it on BART this morning. And it's like, oh, you commute? Where do you come from? And it's an easy conversation starter, just like anything. But the difference is like, while I had many like close relationships in college with people that I had met, they weren't like long lasting, and I didn't hang out with them outside of class because, again, right after class, they drive right home. And right. I drive right home.
You bus right home.
I get on the bus, and then I get on another bus.
Yes.
And then maybe if that bus isn't the right bus, I get on another bus.
This podcast is brought to you by public transportation. I want to backtrack to something you said where you thought you weren't smart in high school, and I was laughing, not because I also think you're not smart, but because
in high school.
But to quite the opposite, I actually consider you one of the more intelligent people that I know.
Thank you.
So why did you think you were a dumb?
I thought I was a dumb. I thought I was a dumb because
it's spelled D-U-M. You're a dumb.
It's spelled D-U-B, but you just mispronouncing it.
The B actually sounds like an M.
Yeah. I thought. Well, that's a good question.
I think this is the hardest I've laughed in a long time.
Since Corona.
Yeah, honestly.
going.
I was going to say, you didn't laugh this hard at my Zoom show?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm sorry.
No, Zoom show sucked.
I agree. I made a whole one on it.
I always just felt like I was dumb because, I mean, it was just going back to like elementary school. I was always a little bit slower on things, just in general. Like, even something as simple as like grammar and basic mathematics, I was just a little bit slower at, just because it didn't initially click with me. And so because it didn't initially click, it was like everyone was getting just slightly ahead of me. And so it's the same thing that like most people go through, I think. It's like, why even try if you're going to fail? Because then it's going to be more embarrassing. You know, that's like the deep-rooted psychology of it. But like when you're a kid, that's like really, that's really bad, because then you're going to fall into line like I did, which is like, okay, in kindergarten, I feel like I'm falling behind, so why even try? Because then it's going to be embarrassing, because everyone's going to see that I'm trying really hard and still failing. So then I do that again in first grade, and then again in second grade, and then in third grade. And then by the time I'm in middle school, I've fallen so far behind in like basic mathematics that the building blocks for what we then learn in middle school aren't there. And then I feel dumber in middle school. And then the building blocks from middle school that you need for high school algebra and calc and stuff, that's not there either. So it's just like it became a perpetually like self-defeating issue.
Right.
So it was just like the building blocks were never there, so I always felt like I was trying to catch up with stuff. My grammar was always pretty bad. I was always a very creative kid, so I always wrote stories, and those were always really the most successful things that I was doing in my classes. But the grammar was just awful, like the sentence structure, everything. But like the plots of the stories were actually like incredibly by the numbers, like TV show material. Like if you watch an episode,
So you're saying Disney should have given you a deal?
They could have, because like I wrote a story when I was in I think second or third grade called Max the Cop. Really good title, and it was just a basic procedural cop drama. Basically, it's the same exact thing that you would see on like an episode of a CSI or something like that, or like, you know, any show that's on TV. And I reread it recently, and it was perfectly structured, like exactly. Wow. And by perfectly, I mean just like paint by numbers. Yeah. So not good. It would be sort of obnoxious. It would be the same as everything else that exists. But like in terms of a child understanding like the structure of a story, it was like really impressive.
Beginning, middle, and end.
Exactly.
Here we go.
And here are all the moments in the story where this cliche happens and that cliche happens, and here's that little arc, and then the bad guy in the end is defeated by his own hubris, and just things like that. Classic.
You absolutely knew what the word hubris meant too when you were...
That's right.
Yeah.
But still, the language and the structure and the grammar, all of that was really bad. So it was sort of embarrassing to show that to people. So a lot of the reason that I felt dumb was just because I wasn't trying hard enough. First of all, I wasn't like putting myself out there, because I've always been a very shy person also. So like raising my hand in class, hell no, not happening. No, thank you. Not even in college. Like,
I was about to ask. Yeah.
Not gonna happen. No. To have eyeballs on me, no, thank you. That's why I go behind the camera or behind the theater.
You just hang out behind the theater.
Yeah, what do you? Wait, hold on. What do you do behind the theater, Dan?
I'm just smoking cigarettes.
Just smoking cigarettes in your leather jacket.
Fucking
looking cool. So, would you say that your perceived failures were due in part to the American school system?
Yes.
I think especially with math, that's like such a frustrating thing to get behind. Behind like starting in like middle school or elementary school or whatever. Just because like you don't make one class, you won't make this one like 4 years down the road. Like it's kind of, I don't know. I think it's kind of like frustrating and dumb. Right.
And then the whole units, all the units after that are based on the previous units. So just constantly falling behind. But then in high school, that turned around because like I accidentally started doing well on my high school English papers. And by accidentally, I mean I didn't do anything differently. It just happened to one time get a good grade on it. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm not stupid.
You're like, I can do this.
I can do it, yeah. So then I just started to do better because I just tried harder, and my grammar still sucks. And I'm still not very good at math. Yeah. But I definitely caught up. Yeah, so then just over high school, I felt a little bit smarter. And then I felt like, okay, now I'm going to prove that I'm not dumb. Like, I'm going to prove that I'm a big smart boy. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to graduate with the highest honors possible, and I'm going to do it in 4 years. And it's just going to happen. And I did. So happy birthday, Daniel.
Great job,
It's not my
buddy.
birthday.
Good job, bud.
So just all of that was just to say that, like, my college experience was, like, really about the work and the study. So that's all that I think I need to say. I think I went for a long time on that one, and we'll come back around, obviously. But, Jack, I want to hear about your college experience.
All right, my college experience, wild ride. Wild stories to be had. Unlike you, I've always been fucking smart.
yeah, you have.
No, but school has always been... How do I say this without sounding like a dick? School has always been very easy for me. Just
You're a
not
dick.
just like, I don't know, it clicks in my brain, like how to take tests and like somehow get by without doing like trying on my homework and whatnot. But that's honestly besides the point for this. Don't know why I brought it up.
You just want to dig me.
I just wanted to dig you.
Yeah, Dan's dumb.
No, because I think I'm the dumbest one in this group, though. So there's a difference between doing well in school and being smart.
I think we all feel that way.
Yeah, that I'm the dumbest one in this group.
Yeah, no, that we are the dumbest one in our own groups.
Anyway,
Just so we all know, there is also a bicycle in this group right now. So continue.
Very rude to my bicycle.
mother. Oh my goodness. All right. Anyways, so I coming out of high school did not really know what I wanted to do when we were all applying for colleges and stuff. I ended up going to Emerson College in Boston for their BFA in comedic arts, which was the first year of that program. I was there for a year and then I left for lots of reasons. Mainly that I did not like it there. Which I think is always the best reason to stop doing something.
Yeah, if you're not vibing with it, there's no reason to be there because it's expensive.
Yes.
It's very far from your home.
There's also a difference between, I think, being homesick and not vibing with a place,
Yeah.
certainly.
So basically the main reason why I left is I'm like, oh, I'm not really getting anything out of these classes that I'm paying so many thousands of dollars for.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going to get out of there and leave because it was the first year of the program, they were kind of treating us like guinea pigs and they didn't know what they were doing.
Which could be really cool because it could be
Yes.
like an experimental college experience. But it seems like that wasn't the case there.
No. So technically I dropped out of school after that and I took a year off and worked. And then when I came around to applying for schools again, all the state schools that I was going to apply to do I don't know what, because once again, didn't really have anything I wanted to study. Were like, you actually can't apply here because you don't have enough credits. Anyways, the one that did was University of Santa Cruz, and I got in there. Didn't really want to go there. But I was like, oh, you know what? We'll do it for 3 years and then we'll be done with school, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And then a friend told me about this place called Columbia College in Chicago. So I went to Columbia College in Chicago for their comedy writing and performance major, which Emerson said they were the first one in the country to have a comedy program. Turns out not the case at all, because this one was already here.
Wow.
Anyways, those are the only two in the country, and I am very confident saying that I'm the only person to have been to both of them.
Yes.
Which I don't think that's something to cheer about, because could you imagine paying that much money for a degree in comedy?
Yeah. And I think that's important to underscore also. You knew what you wanted to do with your life.
Yes.
You wanted to be a comedian. How long have you known that you wanted to be a comedian?
Ooh, since about high school.
Yeah, and so
That's about it.
That's
Yeah.
really the trouble is, like, do you want to go major in comedy? Because it's a thing that you don't have to necessarily go to school for. As a matter of fact, it's almost better that you don't.
Yes, I would agree. But at the same time, I don't agree because I learned a lot in
Totally.
this second go around. But basically, my mother really wanted me to get an education and to have a degree because regardless of what job you have, it's typically a lot easier to get hired if you have some sort of degree from somewhere.
Right.
Because of the way our country is set up. So there was nothing that like I could have. I'm like, there was nothing that I wanted to spend that much time like working on at like all these other schools. Because like at Santa Cruz, I was going to be a theater major, but I don't really like that type of theater. Like, like theater stuff. You know what I'm getting at?
I do, yeah. Like sitting in a chair for a week type theater.
Yeah, like rolling on the floor and like weird movement classes.
Hold up, we'll get to that class when I come around.
But yeah, so I went to Columbia and I'm 9 weeks away from completing my major in comedy, writing, and performance with a minor in writing for television. I did the comedy studies program at Second City there for most of the year, and then Corona happened and I had to leave.
Tragic.
And that's how I got here, taking online Zoom classes that aren't about comedy at this point because I'm just finishing off my credits because I have everything for my major and minor already.
Fantastic.
You still pay the same?
Yes. I still pay the same.
So overall, just brief summary. Very different college experiences all the way around. And I think we all struggled with the idea of like, we know we want to be in some creative industry. And part of it is also just like being like, you don't need a degree necessarily, but we all got differing degrees for different reasons. And I think we all like learned a lot from that. And we'll definitely carry that on. So yeah, I also didn't say my major. I was an English major, and it was mainly to like be able to just like learn about classical stories and really like think about like structure and like how that applies to like writing a feature script or like a pilot or something like that.
Which is a great practical major to get to help you in an artistic field.
Definitely.
Remember that comment I made earlier when I said I'm the dumbest one in this group? Part of it's because half the time I cannot talk.
And bicycle, where did you go to school?
Harvard.
Wow, bicycle was actually the smartest one here.
Went to Juilliard.
But we'll jump into our favorite classes, and then we'll talk a little bit about any clubs if we wish, and then we'll get on our way. Briefly mine, so when I went to AMDA, there was this class called Alexander Technique, and I think it's the best class I've ever taken.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. It was a class I joked about. Alexander Technique is a real technique that like Meryl Streep uses, Morgan Freeman, a lot of great actors. But the first 3 weeks of it was just learning how to sit down in a chair. And no disrespect to anyone who finished that, but I just didn't vibe well.
No disrespect to anyone who can sit in a chair, but just not your thing.
Yeah, and I was gonna say also, I think a big part of like our kind of struggles in finding the perfect place for us was because I feel like our theater department in high school was not like a lot of theater departments. Like we were all actors, but we were also all tech. And we also like wrote our own stuff. We basically did everything. And like, from my perspective, like learning about like what an actor actually does just doesn't interest me that much.
I have taken a couple acting classes at my school, and there are people who are acting majors who have never like gotten their own props before and whatnot, and who would openly say like, I've never had to find my own costume or my own props before. And I'm like, that's so weird, because at our theater program in high school, we had to do everything.
Yeah.
Which was hugely important for us, I think.
And it culminated in us literally putting on our own show without any help. Like we did all the costumes, like the props we had to figure out. Like,
which I'll say, it was fantastic.
Yeah. And we were going to do it again over summer, but COVID was still very much a thing. But anyways, back to classes. But my favorite class was this David Bowie class that I took this time last year. It was my major is English, but the emphasis is in like literary criticism. And this was a seminar that I took with Professor Scott Shershow. And it was basically just like Bowie and philosophy, kind of. We learned a lot about like Nietzsche and Kant, and we applied that to David Bowie and his music, but also just David Bowie as like a person, as a human, because he was one of the most interesting people ever to grace this world. And it was a great class because we just got to discuss in like a 15-person seminar, just like all this interesting stuff about Bowie and how it applies to like classical philosophy and like also just modern philosophy. And I thought it was the best class I took there for sure. Also, a lot of characters in the class. Like this one person just spoke off the top of their head like all the time. So like they would have like their cousin's birthday party the weekend before, and they would somehow try to apply that to the class, and like it didn't always work, but it was also really funny.
That's so funny.
And something about the college I went to, Davis, a lot of the classes you're gonna take are like 50 to like 500 people, and there's not a lot of like interaction there. And I really liked classes that you could really like know everyone in. Like, even if you don't know them outside of it, you can like point to them and be like, okay, you're this weird person in my class, and I know you so well because I constantly like look at you in class because there's only 10 other people. And that was really refreshing to have in this class. And also just, it really got me into David Bowie. David Bowie wasn't someone I really like listened to all that much, but since then I've become a big Bowie head, and it's just really cool because I think Bowie toes the line of like being like a really good artist, but also like musical artist, but he's also in a bunch of movies, and he plays some really good roles in movies. So it just kind of summed up everything for me in college that I wanted out of a class. Like we talked about philosophy, classic stories, we applied it to like a modern person in Bowie, and overall just really good. And I got the highest grade on an essay in that class.
Nice.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Tell me about that essay. What was why was it successful?
Okay, so it's kind of funny because...
Read it to us right now.
Please.
We'll be the judge of that.
It would be kind of interesting to read it to you because...
I don't wanna.
But this professor also... this was my third time having him. Also in 3 years. I had him once every year. But he always like tried to make a creative aspect to the essays. Like, we didn't always have to write like 8-page essays for whatever. Like for this one, the creative prompt was to make a pretend interview with Bowie and someone else. And that was basically what I did. And I applied Bowie's philosophy to the philosophy we were talking about. And it was just kind of like a back and forth between him and like a reporter. And in the comments afterwards, he was like, it actually sounded like David Bowie at some points, which is pretty impressive. And like that's like something I've struggled with a lot in writing, is like defining how a character speaks, because we all speak so differently. And like as a writer, you don't really think about this all the time, but like each character should have their own special vernacular. And that's also another reason I like that class. Like it let me basically make a 10-page script with David Bowie and as a character, and that's a lot of fun. And also just like writing it was really funny because like obviously you had to have quotes from like our readings and stuff. So it would just be trying to like make David Bowie just say that quote like loosely, and then also you had to cite it just because obviously it's an English class still at the end of the day. But and it was like probably the best English class I took, and I took it with my dear friend Adam also, and that was really wonderful to have with him too.
I'm curious if the artist who was the subject of that class was someone that you knew better, how would that have affected the way that you took the class? Like, because it sounds like you weren't big on David Bowie before that. If it was like, I don't know, you love Elton John, right?
Yeah.
Sure. So like if it was Elton John, someone who maybe you know more about, would it be less interesting? Or is it just the fact that it's like an interesting figure?
I think if it was like Elton John, I would just be less interested, because just in general, I feel like Elton John's music is more just about emotion and like finding your true self. So I think if it was like a queer studies course on Elton John, like that would be really interesting. But I feel like with Bowie, it was like, he's like a hugely philosophical like individual. And I think that's what drew me mostly from him. Cause like I knew of him, I just didn't really listen to his music. And I knew some like his philosophical side or whatever. But yeah, I definitely think like Bowie just stuck out because it was Bowie. It's a lot different, and it's a figure I didn't know before. So it's really exploring that, and that's really what college is about too, is exploration. And I was really happy with that class because I didn't initially get in, but then Adam was telling me about it, and I was like, oh, I'll jump in, and then I got to it after I missed the first little thing. But yeah, I think it was genuinely just one of the best classes I took, and also if I look through like all of my courses, like I really don't think I would initially have chosen that, but just how much it stuck with me for like a full year now. I definitely think it's my favorite. Like I took another course with the same professor like a couple years before, and I thought I would like it a lot more, but for some reason it just didn't hit me, and maybe that's because it was like my freshman year, or maybe it was just because it was like a bigger lecture hall. But that was more about like just like comedy and English together. We watched like a lot of stand-up in that class, and we also watched just like a lot of like we watched like The Importance of Being Earnest, and like we read that play, like just like comedy and English together, and it just didn't stick out to me as much as like the philosophical side of David Bowie. I also did take a stand-up comedy seminar that I found a lot of joy in, but again I think a main reason why I like this class so much is that it came at a time where I felt really comfortable in Davis, and like was surrounded with like just like a welcoming environment, and that just like added to it, and I think that just plays a role in it. But yeah, Daniel, what's one of your favorite classes?
Before I describe and talk about the class, I just wanted to briefly talk about the classes that I had taken before it and like why this is so much different. Because at SF State, I was a cinema major. Your freshman year, you can't take any film classes. You just basically take, general education classes. You just start getting that stuff knocked out. And then your sophomore year, you can start to take more film classes, but there's still just like intro film classes. And the stuff that you learn in those classes, while I really enjoyed taking those classes, it's still stuff that I had already taught myself on the internet. It's the very basics of film, and it's like watching the very classics that we had already watched like among ourselves in high school and even in middle school and stuff. So it was more like a refresher on a lot of stuff that I already knew. Obviously there was important lessons that I learned here and there, and just the professors that I had enlightening takes on things, but the subject matter itself wasn't anything super new. Then as you go along, you can start to take more and more film classes, more elective classes within the film major. And your first 2 years, your first like 2.5 years, you take studies classes basically. You can't really take production classes. It's pretty much just, I don't know, what are some classes that I took? I took various like representation classes, like different how like gender representation and ethnic representation in Hollywood cinema and stuff like that. And those are such amazing classes, and SF State is known for its studies way more than its production. If you want to do production, you go to Hollywood, like you go to Los Angeles, you go to USC or UCLA. But if you want like history and an emphasis in study and critical theory, like SF State, that's where you go. It's like pretty sick. So I had taken a bunch of those classes, and I had taken very few production classes. And the few production classes that I had taken, they weren't even heavy in production. It was like, let's do 3 projects for the semester, and you're kind of just going to shoot them by yourselves. So it was basically what we had already been doing. It was like just nothing notable again. It was just, except without my friends. So that was kind of a bummer.
So much worse.
Yeah, so much worse.
But Trent was coming in from BART, from the East Bay. So.
That's true, yeah. That was actually kind of a struggle though. Like, since it was such a commuter school, like all the production classes like were really hard to organize, because it's like, okay, can you come film like at 12:30 tomorrow? And I'd be like, I live in Marin and we're in San Francisco right now. Like I can't get here. And then we would schedule it for like, okay, Thursday at 7, and then so and so from Oakland couldn't come in because whatever. So that was always like,
they were working at the Coliseum.
Because they were working at the Coliseum, exactly.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Then I took one studies class it was just a graduate writing assessment class that you have to take in order to graduate. It's just like a writing about short films class. And I was with a professor, or an assistant professor. His name was Jason Jacadis. And he was not a full-time professor. He was only there part-time because he was sort of a working documentary filmmaker. And watching him teach in that short films class was really enlightening. He had a lot of really great takes on things, and he showed me a lot of really great short films. And I was really enjoying the class, but still shy, sitting in the back and leaving, going on the bus right after class. But I was starting to figure out my schedule for the next semester, which would have been my second semester junior year. I was organizing my classes, and I was super anal about that every year. I was making sure I had 7 different backup plans in case one of my classes got taken.
And did you ever have to use a backup plan?
Never. No, I did a couple of times, yeah. But every version of the schedule, I had a gap on one day, and in that schedule, I could still fit one production class. And then out of nowhere, Jason emails me and says, "Hey, right now we're not getting a ton of numbers for signups for the thesis class next semester. And I know you're not a senior yet, but that wouldn't be an issue. You could just take it early. It doesn't matter because the thesis class isn't itself required to graduate. It's an optional thesis class." And he said, "You should take the thesis class. I think you'd do good." And I was like, "Oh, who, me?" I was kind of flattered. And it happened to be on the day that I had a gap. And it was a production course. And so I was like, yeah, okay, let's do this. So the class that I'm talking about is Cine 620, and that was my thesis class. Coming into the semester, you sign up for the class, and then during your Christmas break or your holiday break, you come up with the idea that you're going to do. Because the class basically is you're going to shoot an 8-minute or less short film, and you should budget about anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 for it. And it's just as soon as the class starts, day 1 of the semester, it's all go. Because there were 2 different versions of the thesis class. There's a 2-semester version and a 1-semester version. And I was taking the 1-semester version. So we had half the time to do just as much work. So that's why we had to figure out the story by the time we came into the class. So day 1 of the class, I came in with an idea that I was happy with. And it was a small class. It was 11 people. And immediately I sat down and I was like, oh my God, I am totally I shouldn't be here, because everyone in the class had so much more experience than me, being on sets and making movies and stuff. And I was just oh Jesus, I made a huge mistake. And also everyone's was dramatic and mine was comedic, and that made me feel really bad.
What is this class, a joke to you, Dan?
Yeah, I was really nervous because we were going around in a circle pitching our ideas, and everyone's was this is my experience going through this horrible hardship. This is my father's experience going through this horrible hardship. And then it got to me, and it was
it was just a bunch of fart jokes.
Yeah. But everyone was super nice in that class. But the reason I talk about expectations is just because day 1, Jason, who was teaching that class, said, "What do you want out of your short film?" And everyone went around and they said different sort of things, and got to me, and I was like, I want exactly what's in my head to end up on the screen, and I want it to be a polished film. I just want to know that I can make something how I see it.
Something that's not a Nothing Notable sketch.
Well, no, even the Nothing Notable sketches, they came out fairly similar to how they were envisioned. They were just envisioned poorly in some cases.
Just a lot of them, when you go back and look, about 75% of them
Sure, yeah.
are not that great.
And a lot of that's just because...
We filmed them in 2 weeks. We
This is
filmed
true.
one a day,
We
I
did
think.
film one a day. That was the best 2 weeks of my life. I was very depressed going into that time period.
It
and
was a
that'll
good
be a
time.
podcast.
And I'm sure we'll get back to not just working on one thing for 2 weeks, but
Right.
Or 2 months might be a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah, but I said to the class, I was like, I want this to be polished, and I want this to be how I envisioned it. And over the course of the semester, you just, it's a really rigorous class. You have, I guess, 13 weeks as a semester or something like that. You have about 10 weeks to get it all done, and then 2 weeks to edit it almost. And then at the end of the semester, we showed it at the Roxy Theater in San Francisco with a packed house. And the whole experience was just a blast. And it was really helpful for me to come out of my shell a little bit, even though in that class I was still super quiet. And I honestly, I feel guilty that I didn't offer more of myself to my classmates because they offered so much of themselves to me. That's the only regret that I have about that class. But just overall, the process went exactly how I wanted it to go. By the end of the semester, I had made the film, and it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. And again, the problem was, I don't think I shot high enough. Even though, because now that I look back on it, I do wish I had made a different film. I do wish I had made a dramatic film. I think a lot of it was I hadn't made a film of true value yet, so I just wanted to prove to myself that I could make a film. And I felt more comfortable in comedy than drama. And I wasn't ready to tell super dramatic stories yet because I just didn't feel I felt like it would come off a little preachy. So the big takeaway for me from the class was just that I did exactly what I wanted. And now that I know that I can do what I want, this sounds like the beginning of a supervillain speech. Jesus Christ.
I can do what I want.
You can do whatever you want.
No, but now that I know I have the ability that I thought I had, I have so much more confidence going forward to tell the actual stories that I think I want to tell. I feel like it turned out well. I hate the writing. That's the only issue. That's why I haven't shown you guys, and that's why I keep re-editing it, is just because I wish I had written it better. But the filming, looks sick, looks dope. I like the actors in it. I think they did a great job. I think everything turned out really, really well. So that's just why it was one of my favorite classes, because I got the most out of it. It was something that I hadn't been doing up to that point. It was a big production class. It was the most that I had ever done professionally. And I really enjoyed just the process of working with all the people that were in my class and my professor, and then showing it at the Roxy. It was just a whole experience that it sort of is the cornerstone experience now of my college time.
Yeah. And just real fast, because I shot a short film that I feel similarly about last year. And it's just so nice to have people who want to do lighting and want to do sound. You know what I mean? Because with us, it was just always oh, fuck, well, we're all performers here. And yeah, we can figure this out. But who
put our lamp over there. And
yeah, we'll put a fucking lamp here. But it was really cool to see people who love to fucking set up a C-stand and put sandbags on and figure out the shot exactly, So,
totally. It's one of the big surprises of film school. I thought everyone wanted to be a director and then ended up becoming a PA,
Yeah.
But no, it's some people actually really want to just do grip stuff. Some people just live for that. They just want to hang out on a set all day. Some people want to do lighting, some people want to do sound, some people want to be editors. So
Brother Sam.
Brother Sam.
Brother Sam.
I've taken up plenty of time. So, Jack, I want to hear about your class.
So I'm going to talk about my class now. When this question was posed, was your favorite class that you've taken, I bounced back and forth because at Columbia, I've actually taken a lot of classes that I found to be very interesting, both involved and not involved with my major. I took a Israel and Palestine class, which is not a class I ever expected to take. But ended up to be fascinating. And then I had a whole semester where I was just at Second City every day and just taking different comedy classes. And that whole experience was the best 9 weeks of my life until Corona happened and ruined it.
A moment of silence.
A moment of silence
for the 200,000 people.
But I think my favorite class that I've taken there was for my television writing minor. I took a class called television production, which basically ended up being all about pitching shows and coming up with ideas for shows, and it basically culminated in us having to create our own show that we had to pitch to actual people in the industry, and we had to make a show Bible to go with it, and had to write a pilot for it. And that was it was 50 pages long was the Bible for my show, which was a stupid ass show about this dude who gets fired from his job and then joins the circus as a clown and hides it from his family.
And it was a drama.
It was a drama. It was a very dramatic. My comp to it was, Schindler's List. I wanted to go for.
Could you imagine pitching to a studio and saying like, just saying like the tagline or whatever, and then just being like, okay, think Schindler's List,
but worse.
Similar tone, similar body count.
And it is during the Holocaust?
Can be. I'm flexible.
It can be.
That's why I get hired.
But basically, like, through the class, we spent like the first like 6 or 7 weeks like looking at like Bibles and pitch documents for popular shows that were on, and like practice. Like, she gave us all these different assignments of like pitch this like children's show here, or find a news article and then pitch a show like inspired by that news article. And it like coming up with like ideas for shows and like creating something has always been like something that I thought was like very complicated. And then through that class, I'm like, oh, it's not as hard as you think it is to like have an idea and like turn it into like an outline for something that you can make then. And I found that to be very fascinating.
Yeah, outline turns into, or I guess idea turns into outline turns into a script, and then all of a sudden you have many scripts, and then you have a series.
Yeah, like it's not that difficult to actually turn it into something, like once you start on it, and I think that's always the hardest part for people is like actually starting.
Totally.
It's like, I have this idea for this thing that I want to make, and then you don't ever like do anything with it. But that class showed me that it is possible. Now making it good is the difficult part of it. And it turned out my show was very well at the end of our final, when we all had to pitch them. The like executives were like, they're like, list your favorite shows that like you would actually consider buying, and mine was one of them.
Nice.
So this is where I'm going to announce that I do have a deal with Netflix coming. Stay tuned.
Now, were there moments, and I'm asking sort of selfishly because I felt this way many times throughout my experience in my class, were there times where like you guys were, workshopping each other's material and someone pitched something and you're like, Jesus Christ, like they are so much better at this than I am?
I've, as previously mentioned, I have been to 2 comedy schools.
Humble brag.
2 art schools. And both of those times I initially felt like the biggest fraud in the world. When I get in there and I'm like, oh, all these people are so much funnier than me. They're so much have so much more experience doing stuff with me. And then a lot of the times it wasn't the case.
Yeah. And a lot of the times everyone is thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because everyone just thinks about like, it's selfish, but like we all think about ourselves when we go into a room,
Mm-hmm.
And especially with comedians, it's so difficult to feel like you belong. But do you feel like your experience in that class like helped you feel a little more belonged?
I feel like
that
experience in my class was like, okay, like thinking big picture, I'm like, this is something that like I could actually do in the future. And has like merit to me, like actually going down this career path. I'm like, I feel like I made something that was like, I called it stupid, but it actually was like solid.
The process of putting those ideas in order in a class like that is like super valuable.
Yeah, that's like, I was earlier saying like, oh, you shouldn't pay to go to like a comedy school or whatever, which I've done twice.
Mm-hmm.
Humble brag.
Big brags.
But like, I think like, so what I tell people a lot of times, like, I'm like, yeah, I major in comedy. They're like, oh, how do you teach someone to be funny? And like, that's not what it's about though. It's like teaching, like you can't teach someone how to be funny, but you can teach someone like how to structure their ideas and how to like turn their ideas into like an actual tangible product.
Yeah, and also just like I mean, people talk about this a lot with SNL. Like when you get on SNL, it's just like you may have like 5 really good ideas, but like you have to have 5 really good ideas every day, every hour. So just like the process of like churning things out and working it constantly also is something that is, if you just go straight into the working world, you might just get chewed right out.
Yep.
Instead, you go to the school and you practice it there. You practice 1,000 different ideas, and you practice like 1,000 different story pitches and scripts and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I've taken like classes that I've taken a couple different sketch writing classes through Second City that are basically like that, where it's like every week you gotta you have to write a new sketch that's like about this specific thing that you get the week before, and it's much like different than SNL, but I feel like it's sort of like that same general idea, but on like the very simplest level.
Right.
Where it's like instead of like doing like 7 a week, you're just doing like 1 a week. Like you're at the baby steps of it all.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and just in general, I think that the more you write and you actually put pen to paper, like not even the easier it gets, but the easier it is to like just come up with more ideas and continue on and like get better.
Also, what's nice is like once you start writing, you'll know quickly whether it's a good idea or not, usually, like whether it's worth pursuing. And then you can just put that in your pocket and then return to that format or that structure of whatever that idea was and then repurpose it for something else. And then it actually works later.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You'll never know if it doesn't work if you don't start working on it, obviously.
And I actually think that taking like improv classes has like really helped me with writing. Because when I basically write, like my first draft is always just like word vomit onto the page. Like I just go through it like there was someone who like said to me once, like in order to like write, like the first thing you have to do is write, which is like a weird sounding thing, but like it's true. Like you just have to start going, and then like I treat it like an improv scene basically, where you're just continuing the story.
Yeah.
And I've certainly fallen into this a lot. Like I when I start writing, I want it to be perfect immediately, and that usually prevents you from actually writing because you, like you said, you just have to throw it up. You just have to vomit, and then hopefully it's coherent enough that you'll be able to understand it when you go back through it again.
Exactly.
Now, one very fun part of that class I took was for our pitch document for our show. We had to put people who we would like to see cast in those roles. And that was very fun to go through and try to figure that out, as well as see like what other people put for theirs. So mine was starring Paul Rudd and, oh my goodness, what's his name? John Lithgow was in mine as well.
That's a what's his name guy.
Yeah. John Lithgow
pair.
played the French head of the circus.
Oh, that's a good.
Yeah,
that's a
I'm
good
like, I
cast.
feel like he would be perfect for that.
Yeah.
This is really fun. This was a really fun discussion because I feel like since like we've kept in contact for the last 4 years and we always hang out when we're back home, we see like little glimpses of these things. Like I remember hearing about your thesis, and I remember you talking about like your TV writing class.
Oh, and we remember you talking about your short film.
Definitely. I think I've talked about my short film in every single podcast we've recorded. But yeah, we didn't really get to clubs, but I think the class discussion was more interesting on this one, and maybe we'll get to clubs another time. But yeah, thanks for talking, guys.
It was a good time.
It was a fun one.
Yeah.
I had fun.
Probably the hardest I've laughed in like 6 months, so
Yeah.
that was refreshing. All right, I think we can cut
Thanks,
there.
guys.